Welcome to Crappy Reviews. I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob. Witches. That's right. This is the Changeling, Season 1, and we're watching episodes 1, 2, and 3. Chris and I are going to discuss and review the episodes, but then we'll quickly be talking about all of the threads of speculation that we're starting to tie together in the show.
To start this week's acting shout out goes to Clark Bacco for her role as Emma for her acting during the opening scene of episode 3 when she was attacking Apollo and the baby. If it was a baby. You all know Rob and I love to respond and engage with as many comments as we can, so we look forward to hearing all your thoughts and theories in the comments about the last 3 episodes. All right, Rob, season 1 so far, overall rating.
I give it a 7 so far. I think it's done a really good job of setting the scene. That's a lot of setting the scenes for a 7. One of the things I like is that we are getting enough of the backstory of these characters that it's letting me buy in, and I'm starting to get attached, especially to Apollo. But I'm getting attached to the characters. But what about you, Chris? So far,
I'll give it
one?
a 7 too. I really like the way that they're not giving me too much information and they're leaving enough open avenues for me to theorize a little bit and let my brain chew into it. We had mentioned that in From they might do it a little too much, but we like it, and Silo did a little too, maybe not enough. But in this show, it seems to be a happy median so far. I like that they're giving me a couple different options. Is she a witch? Is the baby a demon or not? All these kind of things. I mean, you have to kind of put the clues together. And I noticed there's a lot of Easter eggs, different books and different paintings and all that just throughout the whole show that I, get to really dive into, and I really enjoy that. So I'll give it a 7. The acting's good. The story's good. Like most Apple sci-fi shows, it looks really good. We've noticed in Severance and Silo. I've seen some other ones that we haven't reviewed. They all have a good film quality to them. So I'm giving it a 7 with potential, with upside potential.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at it as a 7 is the floor almost for me now. We're at a 7, and don't get me wrong, there are certain things that probably could happen where it goes off the rails, but I feel like I'm at a safe place with a 7, and it can just go up from here. And I agree with you 100%. I think there was a lot of, for those of us who caught our Silo episode, we felt like as we were watching it, there were some holes that kept getting filled very quickly. Those gaps where we normally love to speculate, and Chris and I will talk about, and we like to ask these questions and go back and forth, they were getting answered like the next episode. That's clearly not happening here, right? We're getting more answers every once in a while, not a whole lot. We get little bits and pieces here and there, but we keep getting more questions, which I think is super exciting for us watching it. But I do want to ask you this. We had 3 episodes at once, which was a little bit of that binge. Did you have a favorite of the 3 so far, or at least a scene or anything like that you really liked?
So I think my favorite episode overall was probably episode 2, because I like seeing Emma's spiral into madness, and I like we got a lot of clues and a lot of photography, like the photos and the cell phone stuff, and a lot of the mysteries kind of started building up into. With that said, the opening scene of episode 3, I remember I had seen it before you, and you had texted me and said, wow, they go right into it. And I'm laughing because I remember thinking the same thing. I'm like, well, this got really, really serious really quick. It was a really cool scene. The way they shot it, she was terrifying. That little ring girl movement she does into the kitchen, which I'm pretty sure was actually her and not like post movement. I feel like she did that. Was really cool. The whole thing was like a little bit of Misery, Stephen King Misery, and this whole, Exorcist vibe. The whole thing was really good. So I really like that scene, but I think episode 2 so far for me was my favorite one as far as world building.
Yeah, and I actually agree. I'll say fortunately, but unfortunately, we're on the same page, but I like arguing with you, but I can't do it this time because episode 2 was my favorite, but that first episode of season 3 was also my favorite. I think episode 2 did a really good job of introducing questions that have gotten me hooked, right? There's the big scene. I think I'm remembering it correctly now. They kind of ran together a little bit, but the scene with Michelle in the restaurant. No, that was episode 1, wasn't it? When they were in the restaurant with Michelle.
I think it was episode 1. Yeah,
that was episode 1. So, but like we're getting these questions early on, and 2 really cements a lot of the, hey, we see the direction this could be going, but we just have these questions now that we're looking at. One thing I do want to call out too, because we obviously named Clark Bacco as our acting shout out of the week, and you just mentioned it there too in the beginning of episode 3. I've only ever seen her in Letterkenny, which a very different show from The Changeling. Letterkenny, if you're not familiar, is just a comedy about people living in a small town in Canada. So the fact that she was one of the leads in this show, I was super interested to see how she was going to translate into this role, just from my experience, only having seen her in that. Um, was super confident in Lakeith because I think Lakeith Stanfield is a super talented actor. Um, but it was cool to see through these first few episodes that she was up to the challenge, and seeing her do such a good job in these first few episodes was really cool to me.
Yeah, everyone played a good role, and I would say that it seems like she has the hardest role because she's kind of playing two characters. She's playing herself, and then she's playing this, alternate version. Why she's like that and all that we'll get into later in the episode, but she's kind of playing just two distinct characters, which is incredibly difficult. But Apollo has to also play a pretty hard role as well, with this pull between loving his wife and loving his kid, and the abandonment by his father and all that, and he plays that really well, and you really feel his insecurities and his kind of pain from childhood in the show. In every scene you kind of feel that he's a little insecure, but he's covering it with a mask of like going out there and doing it. He even yells at his mom, "I'm trying all these things as the dad, and it's not going well," and but you can tell he's putting a good face forward to make her happy, to make the kid happy, to make everyone happy. And but the fact that there's an undertone of concern and insecurity and abandonment and just a little unconfident in each scene he's in is a testament to how well he does. Who was nominated for a Best Supporting Actor, so it's not super shocking he can do it, but I just want to call attention to that. I noticed that he's got some layers to his acting, like an onion.
Oh, 100. Well, we can't. It's too early for Shrek references, but I completely agree. I think that was one of the things that drew me to the show. Right, we knew right off the jump he was involved. He was the main character. He's an executive producer. There was just a level of kind of credibility behind the show, just right off the bat, that we kind of saw coming from Lakeith. And I even think a lot of the non-main characters, because right now we've got Emma and Apollo as the real main characters, I think they've also done a great job. I think my favorite non-main character to this point has definitely been Patrice. And I actually said to Katie after the episodes were over that I was like, if anything happens to Patrice, I'm going to riot. Just throwing that out there too. If I have any other Patrice fans in the comments, just let me know, because I feel like that's an easy answer, that he is just the best.
Yeah, I'm also curious to know kind of where his role goes. I mean, this show is definitely about multiple different storybook-like tales, and it seems like everybody kind of has a role to play, and I'm curious to know if Patrice is more than he seems. I get the feeling he's more than he seems. We'll talk about it as the episode goes on and we get into our speculation session, but I feel like there's a little...
Yeah, that makes me think that you have a theory about that, and I don't. I'm getting mixed feelings already, because we haven't talked a whole lot about our full-on theories. We've gone over some high-level stuff, but if you have a theory...
I'm not saying it's a theory. Again, when I say I'm thinking something, it doesn't mean it's a theory. The theory is like a full-blown, this is what I think is going to happen, this is all the moving pieces. I'm just saying there's things that I see in the show that make me think that maybe some people aren't who they say they are, and it might be worth investigating to maybe turn into a theory. It's a nugget more than a theory.
I love chicken nuggets. I don't think I like this one, but we'll see where it goes.
I'm telling you.
Okay, well, now that you have my interest peaked, I think we need to go straight into the speculation. So first things first, Chris, since you already mentioned it, is Brian a demon baby? And if you say no, why are you lying to me?
Yeah, I think Brian is a demon baby. Well, a demon baby. So you have the definition in front of you of what a changeling is. So go ahead and shoot that out real quick.
Okay, yeah. So in European folklore, a changeling is going to be a deformed offspring of fairies or elves that are substituted by them for a human infant. So basically, we're looking at children here in this case for what's being replaced by this changeling. So okay, maybe not demon baby, but it's Brian. a changeling, the changeling.
Well, I mean, essentially, you're right. So what's going on here is that supposedly a devil or a demon-like creature would come and switch the baby out and leave a look-alike demon baby, right? Like behind, like inside a demon, like, but it looks the same. So is Brian this changeling, this demon baby? I would say yes, and the reason I think that is because, in particular, the scene where they're where Emma's in the room with him, she's fallen asleep, and you can hear an obvious tone change in the cry of Brian, and it makes her look, and she's kind of scared, and it kind of solidified for me that he is the changeling that we're talking about, or at least one of them.
Are you talking about the scene where he's like sitting up in the little rocker?
No, that's another scene, because the changelings also, by definition, and there's multiple definitions of this, they all kind of work in the same way, will do things that they do things like that they shouldn't be able to do when when they think people aren't looking. So that scene right there is part of it, and the scene where they're in the crib, where she's looking at him in the crib, you can't see him and he's crying, and then it kind of like reverbs out a little bit, like gives you that demony echo to his voice, and then back out, and she looks scared, and she's like dropping F-bombs at him in that room right there. The only thing that could be happening here is that she's tired. They do make it really clear that these people are exhausted, leaving us a little bit of maybe they're sleeping and dreaming, area. Maybe they're not, but I think that she's not seeing things, and that it does happen. And also, what's important too, I don't want to overrun the particular, I don't want to beat this down too hard, but when Brian sits up and Emma sees him, there's 2 times in the show so far that I can remember where you see her upside down, and that's one of them. And also when, I think in episode 3, when they're getting the chains and they're leaving the
2 and
hallway,
3, when they're walking down the hallway,
they flip upside down, which really leans into this. The mirrors are all over the place. You're looking at 2 different kind of versions of reality. How exactly that works, we'll get into it, and we're not 100% sure, but it's an interesting film take when they shot it like that on purpose.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think one way we might probably look at this show is, I feel like at this point with these 3 episodes we've got a lot of questions, and I think you and I have done a lot of talking about kind of framing the questions of what we're looking for now, and I think we're going to try and find some of those answers as we go throughout the show too. So like you said, there is clearly that mirroring piece. I know you even said that to me when we watched the trailer, that mirroring piece of, kind of going upside down. So I think, I definitely don't have a good answer for that yet either, but I definitely agree that that's one of our big things to watch for going forward too. What does that flip mean? Yeah, because like you said, when you started saying that, seeing it invert by the camera is a really kind of dead giveaway that there's something important going on here.
Right. That we might be looking at this other version, because in the inside, maybe is it Inside Edition? There's like another trailer, like an interview of them.
Yeah, they did a little bit of like a behind. I think it was called an inside look,
and
it was Clark and Lakeith.
Yeah, and they show some stuff that's not in the trailer, and part of that is like you're going to see a New York that you didn't know existed. I'm paraphrasing, but this other version, this other dimension of this other, other thing that's happening where there's 2 different versions. And I think that theme plays throughout the show a lot, because when Emma does get up to go help baby Brian, he's sleeping again. Right. He's not sitting up. So as she turns, as someone who has kids, they don't like wake up and sit there. And then like when I get out of bed, like fall directly back asleep, they're awake. So the fact that he's sleeping again makes us think like, okay. And then she immediately gets one of those photo things. So I don't know if they're changing up or exactly how it's going, but they've done that a few times where they flipped it over. And there's another particular scene that I'm going to bring up just to tie into that, is the memory that Emma gives Apollo about her trip to Brazil. When we see her do it in the show, she has her hair pulled back, and she has like an open shirt with 2 flowers on it and like a tank top thing underneath it. When she goes back to tell him the story, in the diner, which by the way, to the left of them is a mirror. There, she recounts it. We see it through her eyes, and her hair is down, and she has a completely different shirt on. And the demeanor between the two Emmas is not the same. One is very afraid and unsure, and the one that we see in the recount from Emma in the diner is a lot more in line with a stronger, more confident Emma, as if it's
Yeah,
not
definitely
really the
less
same
afraid of the
person.
situation, like leaning into what's happening more so than kind of being nervous.
Right.
Why? Because watching it, I go, how about we don't go near the creepy lady sitting by the waterfall? Because that just seems like a dead giveaway of something you shouldn't do. But yeah, like, and to your point, she's nervous about it at first, kind of hesitant, and then
Right.
it's kind of like, it's almost like sometimes if you like misremember something a little bit, like if your memory is, I see they do it in shows all the time where the memory, you could almost say, is like a corrupted memory kind of thing, right? Where it's, oh, I remember it this way, but it wasn't exactly the same. Is kind of the vibe I almost got, where for whatever reason that memory is not matching up with the exact thing that happened.
Right.
So what is, why is that happening?
Right. And that leads to a lot of questions about who is really who they say they are, or who they think they are, and maybe not who they say they are, but who they think they are. Because is there more than one changeling?
I do think that's a good question, because I think one of the ones that you and I want to discuss early on now is, who is the changeling? I think I am already in a decent amount of agreement with you that probably, likely, more than one. I don't think it's a one-off, there is only one changeling, but I do think, because of the title of the show, just, general things, there is one in particular that we're focusing on.
Right.
In the show. Who, I have my opinion, and I don't actually know yours for sure, but who do you think is the changeling?
So I think the right now we're being directed as Baby Brian as the changeling, and I agree that I think he is the changeling. With that said, I also think this ties into another theory altogether, but when we see Apollo's father come back when he's 4, he comes in with the mask thing and the breath and the whole thing, the smoke. He picks him up, takes him into the bathroom, into the white fog, which is obviously not just steam. We're looking at 2 different kind of fogs here, because it's so dense and rolling. And then later on in the show, we find out that his mother comes home and sees the fog coming through and goes in, and she tells him that she was able to keep him and send his father away, right? So what I think is happening here is that Apollo was going to be a changeling, and his mother is some sort of a witch herself, and she was able to have really kind of cast Brian Sr. out of the situation, out of the house, and keep Apollo in the realm. And that's why she has him baptized, and she's very adamant to have baby Brian baptized, because she wants to keep him, quoting her, from all the dark creatures on the earth, or in the earth. So I think that's why Apollo was going to be a changeling, and she was able to stop that. She makes reference to protecting him with her every breath when she's pregnant, etc., etc. And I think that his mother is some sort of a sorceress or a witch. And there's a book in the sale, The Sorcery of Dobu, which is an African country. So I feel like that's kind of leading me to believe there's multiple covens of witches out there and multiple different kinds of witchcraft, and she's doing whatever she has to do to keep Apollo safe, especially after the loss of her brother.
Okay, so I think, I'm not gonna lie, I think you kind of talked me out of where I was a little bit, because I didn't have all that context when we talked about it before. Because I was leaning towards, personally, about Apollo being the changeling, because again, to that point you made of when he sees the memory now of his father showing up, that to me, he actually, however you want to put it, completed the process to where Apollo was a changeling and his mom didn't actually know at that point. That was where my mind was at.
You could be right, by
in
the
hi-
way. She could have baptized the changeling, therefore kind of voiding out the changelingness. I don't know, but
maybe potentially. But I also don't know at this point. One of my big questions around the changeling mythos and pieces, right, is if that changeling grows up, do they know they're a changeling, right? Is if Apollo was a changeling, does he know that, right, or does he
right.
just think he's this child? One thing I would add that I actually think might lead into the credence of yours is that if his father was the one who was trying to have this happen, have Apollo be a changeling. I keep going back to the Waters in the Wild, the book that he says he was going to read to Brian every night, the one that his dad had, and then he found in the a probabilia box that was at the front door when he was older. I feel like there's some connection between that book and whatever is establishing the changelings, right? So I'm starting to get the impression that, and this is a lot of this is forming as we talk. I know we've done this before when we've talked about shows, but the idea that Brian West was a part of whatever it was that's getting these changelings into the world, and then now his son was going to be one. To your point, if he was trying to do that and his mother got home first, stopped it, sends him away, as we've said, um, and maybe he's tied in. I know one thing to call out too that you've definitely picked up on, and I know I picked up on, the opening scene of the show is describing this voyage of these Norwegian uh, passengers on the ship. I'll say passengers. They were leaving Norway for religious freedom and everything. Very very convenient that they never specify what that means, but for religious freedom. And they even mention about how they got some help from the water because otherwise it would have been too treacherous of a journey. We do see an obvious interracial couple piece there.
Right.
So again, we're still very early. I don't have all of this quite pieced together, but I feel like we're kind of starting to see some of the edge pieces, and we're trying to put the puzzle that way. And also, again, the tie-in too that the in the ship it was a Norwegian ship, and we find out that Emma was photographed, well, by herself basically, but essentially by a Norwegian photographer. This is one of those things where in any other TV show or a lot of other TV shows, you just kind of brush it off and you keep going. But in something like this, when there's a big mystery that you're trying to piece together, if you've got a Norwegian photographer and a Norwegian ship and not a whole lot of other things mentioned, that flag goes up immediately. Hey, what's the connection here?
Yeah, I agree with that. And to be specific, so the ship in the beginning was 52 men and 52 women, which is a specific number. I mean, I guess obviously they took couples, but they don't mention any children either on the ship. These are all childless people, we're assuming. And they say that it was an impossible trip and they had help. And then as they say that, the water kind of turns black underneath, similar to the black mist. And the fairies that take these children and leave changelings in the lore are Norwegian. So what I'm assuming is happening here is they basically sold off generations to these fairies and said that you're going to be able to take or do what you need to do. They're pretty much just like giving draft picks way down the line here to get across because they want to practice their religion freely, which again, inside that box that has the sorceries of Dobu is the witchcraft book. The witchcraft, the old religion, sorcery and sex, witch hunting are all in that particular box. So it feels like they might have been leaving to practice witchcraft in America, and they got help by basically signing off saying that maybe every couple, whatever generations or whatever it might be. And the reason I think that too is the interracial couple thing. I don't think was just a nice thing to do or to make a political statement. There's a reason for that, and I feel like it's because Norwegian people, for the vast majority of them, are white. So it would make a lot of sense that you have 52 white or 104 white people on this ship coming over, and both of these people that are dealing with things, Emma and Apollo, have white parents, the father for Emma and the father for Apollo, and maybe they're part of the generational curse, and it's not the mothers who are dealing with this. It would make less sense that someone from Uganda, like Apollo's mom, is somehow brought into a Norwegian fairy curse, and more that his father is, right? Just because of his ethnicity, that he could have Norwegian ancestors. So I think that's kind of how this ties in, at least for me. How the photographer ties in, I don't really know. I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing some kind of shape shifting, or that maybe they're coming for what's theirs. That the check is due and they're coming to get paid, and that's kind of how it worked. But that's kind of how I see the Norwegian ship in the beginning. What's going on there after seeing all 3 episodes.
I don't want to bounce too much, but there was one thing about the water I wanted to call out too, because one thing I noticed when I was watching it was, to your point, when the ship's going, we have the moment where it looks like the water drastically kind of changes under and around the ship. And in episode 2, or the very end of episode 2, before everything just hits the fan in episode 3, when Emma is leaving, when they kind of have the lead into the psychotic break of saying they become unresponsive and they don't, when everything kind of breaks at that point, when she says, "You don't see, but you will," and leaves the apartment, they cut to a scene of the water rushing towards the George Washington Bridge, and it's moving really oddly. It's not a normal wave going there. It's like it's almost like there's some kind of,
it's like there's a ship that you can't see
inside. That I almost got the impression it was almost like watching a shark swim,
like a submarine
under the water.
Where
it's moving the water, to where there something is there with the story of the ship and coming from Norway, and the connection there of it. Again, we think we know witches are involved here. We literally end episode 3 with witches. Like, we know it's involved, right? So whatever this, I think my biggest question at this point for the whole show, right, just overarching, is, are there 2 different things happening, right? Like, are we dealing with a colliding of 2 different things potentially, or is this all just one witch plot to put a changeling in the world, right? Like, are there witches and a changeling, different sides, like whatever's putting the changelings in, and then witches, or is it all just one thing?
So for me, I think yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. You were going to say it, so go ahead.
Yeah, that one of the other books, because we, right from the jump, you can tell, he's a book collector and seller. She's a librarian. There's going to be book clues. One of the big ones is War of the Worlds, right? Like the lawyer who his mother worked for put the book on her desk and tapped it. They made a point of framing it. War of the Worlds, right there. So that's what leads me to believe that. I have lots of thoughts. I'll save them for later so we can get more context and stuff. But there's definitely 2 pieces to this going on at the same time.
I agree with you 100%. I think that there's that you have witches. I think the witches aren't the bad guys here. Right. I feel like the fairies or the fae or whatever we're going to call them are the bad guys. And historically, fairies, like outside of Tinkerbell, are mischievous at best and evil in most tales, right? They aren't very nice. Either they're going to just like kind of mess your day up and laugh about it, or just, they're going to take your kids and eat them. I mean, there's not a lot of like happy fairy tales.
And for good context,
if
anybody needs a good example of what the like evil mischievous fairies are, if you've ever seen the Leprechaun movies, that's like kind of the vibe, where they're just going to come around messing everything up, and they're just going to get really good enjoyment out of it the whole time, like kind of laughing and giggling.
Yeah, so, it's they're definitely, I feel like they're trying to do these changelings, and I feel like there's a lot of them. I feel like the missing posters have a lot to do with this. And I feel like there's at least 104 of them out there, because they have 104 people on the boat, and 104 people went and signed away some great grandkid, Rumpelstiltskin style, and they said, hey, in 100 years, you're going to take the next kid. And they're like, sounds good, I'll be there. And that's kind of how it went down. I feel like that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And I want to just go back to your boat thing. Right before the invisible boat, Apollo and Emma are on a boat going under the bridge, and they're like, "This is, like
he
this
calls it
is
a turning point.
A turning
He
point.
thinks
Yeah,
it's a turning point. I'm glad we went on this date. Yeah, or I'm glad we came out.
and it's also a place that she says if she lost her kid, she would commit suicide. She would just jump off the bridge. So there's a lot going on with that. Again, this like two worlds colliding thing, War of the Worlds, mirror images, smoke and mirrors, dark smoke, light smoke. There's a duality to this show. Obviously, we're not like giving anyone brand new news, but
the other islands of New York.
The Other Islands of New York is in this is one of the books.
Book reference.
Yeah, I mean, so just to be clear, the books that we have are To the Waters in the Wild, To Kill a Mockingbird, A Stranger is Watching, War of the Worlds, The Other Islands of New York, Sorcery of Dobu, Witchcraft, The Old Religion, Sorcery and Sex, Witch Hunting, A Stranger Among Us, and Sleeping Murder. Sleeping Murder is when she's first meeting Apollo and he asked her out on the date for like the first time. That's the book she's holding. And after reading the description of the book, it is about a person who I think is like wrongly accused for like murdering their kid. And it's not a fantasy book. It's like a murder mystery, but it still has a very similar plot that Emma's going through.
It might be dumb, but if I remember looking at it correctly, I think it was an Agatha Christie
novel. It is an Agatha Christie novel, yes. So those are the books. I mean, I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones.
There definitely will be.
Yeah. And also something I want to go to and look at, and I've been having a hard time finding it, is when she walks in the library, the two large murals on both sides, they frame that door scene pretty often. And there's these two large, like, biblical creation Sistine Chapel looking paintings on the left and the right of her that look like they're supposed to touch, but the doors are in the middle. And I'm curious to know how that works out, especially if we're going to see any kind of Greek mythology in terms of Apollo or other gods. I feel like that's going to happen some way. So I'm going to keep looking into that, and I'll post something on the site about it. But I feel like the paintings on the side of the library are important, on the sides of the doors.
So speaking of the library, this one isn't Emma's library, but one of the big kind of Easter eggs or clues that you think you zoned in on was the bumper sticker on the car outside one of the estate sales, which said Librarian of Alexandria. I know you wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit, Chris.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was watching the show for, I don't know, like the fifth or sixth time today. And probably should have been doing some other work stuff, but I had it on the background. And again, it came up and I go, man, that bumper sticker, they really zoom in on that. And I feel like because of their love of books and preserving books, and a big atrocity that happened in Greece was the Library of Alexandria, which was supposed to be the largest repository of scrolls at the time, but books and learned knowledge in the world. So to have that on there, an older woman who kind of hoarded books and had first editions and all that kind of stuff, I feel like that was something they're referring to, especially because we're dealing with entities, whether it be witches or fairies, that are very, very old. So they could have easily been around doing stuff like that at times when that was going on. The library was supposedly burnt down. Emma's mother's house is burnt down, and there's that fire reference is her memories are lost, and it's burnt down, and she loses those memories, kind of like we lost the knowledge that was in the library. And it's also kind of a callback to Apollo. The library was in Greece, and Apollo's a Greek god that has a lot more to do than just the sun. It's healing and all kinds of other powers. You can look through the attributes that Apollo has, but it's more than just the sun god. And so I feel like there's a little subtle throwback or a clue that we're dealing with the Library of Alexandria, and it's not just Librarian of Alexandria. It seems like they're trying to like subtly tell me something. What do you?
So not in Alexandria, Virginia.
I don't think it's in Alexandria, Virginia. I think it's supposed to be a lot more old world. I feel like that's the vibe I got, that they're like really, they almost just told me, but they put librarian instead of library, and they basically said it, and so I feel like they're trying to tell us something.
Yeah. Well, to segue badly like a news anchor, speaking of librarians and older things, we're looking at this witch group coven that we're not sure about yet. One of the things that I am starting to pick up on is there's definitely got to be a witch or witches kind of already popped up that we're going to learn about. I know you think there's a potential that Apollo's mother has some kind of connection to some kind of witchcraft, but I do think as far as this kind of Norwegian side of the witches that we're looking at, this superpower or whatever it is, um, the one that stood out to me was the older librarian that worked at Emma's library as well. That kind of seemed like she wanted to be very involved, and she was talking to Emma a lot. I just, it's just one of those things that
I
I'm getting a
agree with
vibe.
you. I think that she
It
seemed
seems like it lines up.
less afraid than she should have been with someone with a shotgun.
Yes,
And
that
I
was
feel
a
like
big reason.
that when Emma says she's starting to forget things, she was quick to give her mommy brain, which, although is a real thing, it was an easy way to say, no, 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 you're not forgetting thing. It's not, it's just totally normal. But it could be that she's aware that a transition's happening and
Right.
she's just
She
writing it
wants to
off
make
as
it
mommy
go
brain.
smoother.
Right. And she
Mhm.
gave examples about all this other stuff. So I feel like you're right, if that we might be dealing with, maybe she's not an evil character. She could be just kind of a sentry to watch as Emma grows into her role or does whatever it is she does. But I feel like you're right in that regard.
I know, I know because I've asked you this question. You haven't seen Hereditary, but for those that have, if I just literally right now say I'm getting a lot of things that I could see potentially going along the same lines as Hereditary. If you've watched the first 3 episodes of the show and you've seen that movie, I think you're probably able to pick up on what I mean by that. So that's a strong kind of road I could see this going down a little bit. I don't want to spoil it for Chris, mostly because I love that movie and I think he needs to watch it.
I'm gonna watch
So
it, but I hear it's
I will hold off.
absolutely terrifying, and
It
it's
is, and
kind of
that's why I
late,
love
and
it.
I might not want to do that.
Okay,
tonight.
maybe not. Maybe not.
I might want to watch
At
it in the
some
daytime.
just at some point, and you probably will want to watch it in the daytime.
So hold on, I got one last thing for you. I got two things, and I want to wrap it up because I don't want this to go on forever because I know we have long episodes. But I think Patrice, in that same scene where we see the library, the librarian of Alexandria, and he walks up, and I think it's the first time we meet Patrice.
I believe so. Yeah.
I feel as if they're unveiling Patrice more than just meeting Patrice with the slow opening of the garage door. And I feel like maybe Patrice has something more to offer, or maybe a tidbit of knowledge, or maybe his time overseas. I don't really know. But I just get the vibe between
William Wheeler.
Wheeler when he's like, Patrice sent me. And I'm like, this seems like a weird, like he ran him down. And I feel like there's just more to Patrice's character than just like his buddy. And he's like, I knew then I could just be normal around you. And I'm like, maybe there's more to this guy. I could be totally wrong in reading into it because, like we've said in other episodes, when you start to do these kind of reviews, your brain's working, you're overclocked, and you're seeing everything as a sign. So I might need to pull back a little bit. But basically, when that garage door opened, it was more of like an unveiling than just like he opened the front door and they said hi. That's just the vibe I got. But what do you think, being that he's your favorite guy?
Yeah, no, I just think you're wrong. He's the best. That's all.
I didn't say he's
That's
not
it.
the
End of
best. I
story.
just said he
No,
might
he's the
be
best.
even
No.
better.
Oh,
Maybe
Matt,
he's like the
no, it's
most
not.
best.
That's not what you mean at all, and you know it.
The best assist. All right. Lastly, I have a question. Who is taking the photos? We see that he's reading A Stranger is Watching in the Library when she comes home. There's multiple times that even when photos don't pop up, clearly they're being watched when she leaves the library, when he's walking by. To go to the library, they're clearly being watched all the time, not just when the photos come through. Who do you think it is? I have my own theory.
I think the two options that have come to mind for me is that either they set up a red herring with William Wheeler because he mentions that he has a bad habit of videotaping and things like that when he's in the group, and he videotapes the other woman talking about Cal and the wise moms. So I think that one's a bit on the nose, but I do think it could pay off as the person taking the pictures. The other one is we go back to the fact that it was a Norwegian photographer, so that took the, I'm using air quotes, picture of Emma, and again, a little on the nose, but if it's someone who is intimately related to what's going on, it would be a bit of a parallel as to why they'd be taking pictures.
Okay. So I don't disagree. I don't know if I don't have like a super strong answer, but I have my own thoughts. So one thing I want to tie back to real quick is I just thought about it because we're talking about the group that goes back to our generational curse. Is the other woman in there that has the breakdown and that saying living the same thing as Emma was, is also a white woman who could easily have Norwegian heritage as well. It seems like, there has to that there's always a person that could have Norwegian heritage that's having these kind of problems. And I doubt this person also had the 3-wish string. So I think the 3 wishes is a separate issue than the changeling. Because I don't think that this person or all these other people also had a Brazilian witch put a string on them. So I think that's important. 2, I think it's weird that William is there at all and he doesn't seem to have a thing. Like he's almost there to watch him instead and maybe like do reconnaissance for the witch coven. So I feel like that's why he does it. But who I think is taking the photos, or at least a potential candidate, is I think that Apollo's mom is in the running. I think that her obvious, I don't know how to use this phone line, which wasn't all that necessary to be in the show, was like right there. She also, when she's showing baby Brian the phone and they take it away for too much screen time, she wasn't showing him anything. She didn't have like Coco Melon or one of the kids shows on. It was just like a text message. I don't know what that is. So it's almost like, and she seems to not, I don't want to say not like Emma, but I think she definitely has a distrust, and that distrust might come from one witch knowing something about Emma, like that Emma might not even know about herself. Even at the wedding ceremony, she claps like after everybody else does, as if she's like, and that was after she got back from Brazil. So she's a little skeptical, a little cautious. Emma's like in that scene, like, oh, what would we be protecting him against if we got him baptized, right? Like real nonchalant, almost like, like dismissing Apollo's mom. So I feel like there's just a chance that it could be her doing this, or maybe she's part of the whole thing. I don't know. I just, that particular thing, that scene with her doing that and the relationship with Emma puts her in a little bit of a suspect way. And I think she's also has some sort of sorcery or witchness herself. That's how I see it.
Okay, well, with all that being said, I think that's a good segue into our question of the week. What do you think Emma's 3rd wish was?
To answer the question, leave a review on Spotify, drop it in a comment under this YouTube video, and find us at Twitter at crappy_reviews. To answer the question, leave a review on Spotify, drop it in a comment under this YouTube video, and find us on Twitter at crappy_reviews. While you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you've already subscribed, we really appreciate it. And we'd love to keep growing the channel. So if you know someone else who loves this kind of content, please share the videos and have them subscribe too. It really helps us out a lot. Thanks for listening to the Crappy Reviews with Chris and Rob, and we'll catch you on the flippity flop.